Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming to listen to myself and James here today. We're going to be putting together a little session here around VMware Cloud Foundation. I'm going to do a quick, just show of hands. Who knows what VMware Cloud Foundation is? Well, better than I was hoping. That's really good, because you might actually listen to this. So this is a little bit of a session that me and James have put together based on our real-world experience, either as customers or with the customers that we work with on a daily basis, and just looking at some of the challenges that they face when they're going through maintaining and operating these on their day-to-day, and trying to basically just give everybody else a bit of a heads up around the different tooling that's available to you and some of the things to try and avoid should you come into certain problems. So if we just skip on to the next one, James. Little intro into who we are. So my name is Stephan McTighe. I'm a technical account manager at VMware. I'm also a vExpert, and I've been in IT for around about 15, 16 years now, doing various different things along the way. And apparently I enjoy the pain of going through certifications and exams. And then I'll leave it out to James.
Yep, I'm James Tiffany, again, technical account manager at VMware. I've been in IT far too long, and yeah. So just going through the agenda quickly, we'll go through some of the health check-in and tools that are available, the ability to report and observe the environment, how to administrate it, and the patching and upgrade process.
Brilliant. So one of the first tools that if anybody is running a VCF environment or VMware Cloud Foundation environment that you need to be really aware of is the SOS tool. Should you be doing an upgrade or should you be doing any troubleshooting, this is probably one of the first tools you're going to want to be looking at to help you try and understand what's going on and looking at the health of your environment. So as you can probably see in the background, there's a bit of a GIF going on of kind of just showing you roughly what happens when you run a cut down version, which is just a health check. It goes through and checks various different things within the environment, and you can see there on the left, there are various different parameters and flags you can add to the command, which is a top line that ends in SOS, to kind of limit and change the export that you get out of the command. One of the good things about this is you can probably pull this into things like your daily checks quite easily. It's the sort of thing you're going to want to probably add to your daily checks, if we're perfectly honest. As you can see, it gives you a lot of checks, tells you when things are green, changes colour and goes to the lovely red or orange if you've got warnings or problems that you probably then want to take a look at. If anyone wants to grab the QR code at the top, that will take you through to a bunch of the administration documentation around that command, and you can find all the different parameters that exist for it. Here is just a couple of other little examples in that it can do password checking. So SDDC Manager, as part of VCF, controls and rotates, or can control and rotate all of your passwords. Things can get a little bit out of sync at times if you've got expired passwords, etc. So the password check parameter can help you find those. And then there's also things looking at your ESXi nodes, and over here looking at the services that exist within the VCF stack. We've got just the SDDC Manager over here. Sorry if that's a little bit small. And then things like the vCenter service as well. So again, really useful information as part of your daily checks when you're looking into those.
So Skyline is the ability to have a cloud-based view of your components. So you can deploy a collector on site, you configure that collector to the various components, and then you're able to log onto a cloud console and be able to view the information. And what does this give you? So it gives you a centralized view. It gives you the ability to very quickly look at different versions. So if you're asked to, what version are you running and things like that. But the other great thing is it then goes into findings and recommendations. And what that does is that gives you a view of your environment, and if there's any security fixes and anything that's applicable to your environment. Now, when Skyline first came out, it had the ability to ingest VCF, but the findings and recommendations were generic, whereas now you probably can't see it very well, but you can now filter on specific VCF events. So if you need to upgrade, if there's security vulnerabilities in your environment, Skyline will show you that. And the other great thing is that it's got log assist. So when you log an SR, it gives you the ability for the support engineer at the other end to request you to upload logs, and they can facilitate that upload to save you the time and effort of doing it yourself. So that's Skyline, so that's online, needs cloud connectivity, but obviously there's customers out there that don't have that facility. So there's Skyline Health Diagnostics, and like I say, it's great for air-gapped environments. It gives similar services to Skyline itself, but it will enable you to ingest logs, so you can look at logs, and it runs health checks against the environment, and it's built to understand the VCF construct as well. So again, it'll only give you recommendations on VCF type events, and you can then start getting alerts, recommendations. It'll look at firmware, drivers, and give you recommendations on things that you might need to look at in your environment before you do things like upgrades or just day-to-day in your environment.
And this comes on to another thing. So I imagine there's quite a few people in here who know what PowerShell is. There is a module which is maintained by a bunch of people, including some VMware people, which is called the VMware Cloud Foundation Reporting Module. It's available on the PowerShell gallery. This, again, is just another tool that you can make use of as part of things like daily checks to be able to keep track and monitor your environment. As you can hopefully see, there's actually light and dark mode, which is quite nice. I'm a big fan of dark mode. But it will give you, again, service reporting and give you basically health check reporting for you to be able to monitor. So another useful one, which is really easy to get hold of. And again, the QR code at the top will take you over to the GitHub page where you could grab that and take a look, and the examples and installation information is all there. And then this is another little tool which I've actually made use of myself not too long ago. This is a cool little VMware Fling that has been produced. It's a little Python script that you can run on a vCenter server. It doesn't necessarily need to be a vCenter server that is associated with VCF. So for anybody that is just running a normal vSphere environment, this is actually another useful tool for you to have should you want to be doing any troubleshooting or for any kind of observability. So there's a list of the various checks that it can do over there on the left-hand side. So it can be looking at the different certificates within an environment, within vCenter, as well as then DNS, NTP, etc., etc. And there's a little bit of a snippet of the output there, and the GIF rotating in the middle. Again, QR code. If anyone wants to jump onto the VMware Flings website, they can go and grab that.
So some of the other tools that are available. The first one is a tool that was created by VMware PS Guy. It's a web page where you can go in and you can create VCF JSON files for day 2 operations, like creating workload domains, adding clusters. Now, anyone who's done that previously, the API Explorer available in the SDDC Manager is great, but it gives you, and you have to fill it in yourself, and there's a lot of manual work. This is a web page. You go in, type in all the information. At the end of it, you click on download, and you've got a sample JSON file with the information you've populated. So you can use that to actually do the work or build a template that you can then edit yourself later on.
And then we've got the NSX upgrade tool. That's another good one for any pre-upgrade check. So VCF will do its own pre-upgrade checks before you kick off an upgrade. But there is a separate tool out there which is recommended to use and can give you a set of different information and troubleshooting steps should you need it. So another one to have in your toolbox and be aware of should you be doing any VCF upgrades to hopefully get you a much cleaner end result. And then just something to be aware of, it's not necessarily sort of after you've deployed it. This is more the actual deploying of it, but I wanted to kind of bring it in there because it's similar to the great tool there that's on the left that's been generated. But you can actually now bring up files in the JSON format. So if you're trying to look to deploy VCF in a non-standard way, but perhaps with a slight customization, whether that's like multi-NIC or anything like that, or multi-virtual distributed switches, this tool over here can actually help you with producing that JSON config in an automated way for you to then consume. So if anybody's labbing or you're looking at doing anything like that, or spinning up and deploying new environments. Another one to kind of help you along the way.
So going into reporting, so you can have it inside the VCF construct or outside it, but there's area operations, used to be called VROPS, with the vRealize rebrand into area. But what this does is, so obviously everyone knows what VROPS does with the monitoring and everything like that, but inbuilt into the product is the ability to connect. You can see it in the top right, is an integration to allow you to connect into VCF. And what that does is it starts exposing the constructs itself. Now that works great, but there is also a secondary SDDC management pack that's available free of charge from the VMware marketplace, and that gives you even more dashboards and functionality. And what it then does is it starts allowing you to see the whole VCF construct inside VROPS. So you can see in the left-hand side, you can see the SDDC manager, you can see the components that have been deployed, it goes down to clusters. But the other great thing is once it's configured, which is just a couple of user accounts, if you add a new workload domain, it's automatically visible, the same with clusters. And then you start getting the full functionality of VROPS, being able to look at health of not only the SDDC manager, but all its components. You can do alerting, monitoring, all of the good stuff that VROPS does, but it's all within the context of the VCF construct itself as well. So you can start understanding, seeing, viewing your environment, being able to support it. You've got the ability to connect it to CMDBs, maybe ticketing systems and things like that as well. Other packs that are available, the vSAN performance dashboards, and this allows you to then start deep diving into the vSAN performance. So you can see there's in a single dashboard, you've got 28 different metrics, everything from performance. You can actually see the configuration of your environment, what's been set up. You can, the great thing is it does capacity, but it also allows you to look at very basic costing as well. So you can start having the understanding of what's being used, how much that might cost, and things like that. Utilization, and again, can be all linked into systems that can alert and report if you start, if your utilization goes up or performance goes down, you can then build that into potential ticketing systems as well. Again, fully aware of any new constructs that come in, so any new clusters, workload domains, things like that will automatically be viewable in these dashboards as well.
And then one of the other products, again, was vRealize Log Insight until very recently. It's now called ARIA Operations for Logs. Slight difference in what VROPS does, or ARIA Operations now, in that is a lot of structured data put together. Operations for Logs is around just absorbing all of the unstructured data from log files from the different connected components. So one of the features that I think is probably quite underutilized from the people that I've been speaking to recently is the log filtering. It's very powerful and probably can be quite overwhelming, especially when you start to try and string together regex queries. Not one of my favorite topics to do, if I'm perfectly honest. But it can be extremely powerful. And then what you can then take from that is building into these queries that you can build up with quite specific things. They can then be brought into dashboards. So not only can you get your dashboarding in operations, you can also get it in operations for logs as well, and build different capabilities that could be quite customized. Quite a unique thing then with this is that once you've actually maybe found a list of events that you want based on, and I've used an example here of NTP, you can then actually begin to dive into that in context. So seeing a list of NTP errors doesn't necessarily give you all the events that you can see ahead of it or post that event, and cannot necessarily help you with actually what really went on when you're trying to do troubleshooting. So being able to hit view in context will then take you over to the specific log file where it found that entry, and then you can actually begin to see, well, what were the first 10 events before that, and what happened after that, and help you build a bigger picture for troubleshooting. So can be very powerful. It all links into operations, ARIA operations. So certain events then can be set to alarm into VROPS. need to stop calling it VROPS, probably, especially like Sam's probably going to tell me off because he's involved in that. In with operations and vice versa. So you can also have integration then back in from ARIA operations into ARIA operations for logs. Really rolls off the tongue. Again, as James has pointed out, once again, everything is configured through SDDC Manager, and you've pulled in that into VROP operations for logs. Any new endpoints that are brought into the configuration, again, can be auto-discovered into here. And again, another QR code. If anyone wants to go and actually look at the official documentation, there's a load of stuff up there to pull off and take a look at.
So as I mentioned, the two, you've got the integration and the additional SDDC Manager pack in ARIA operations, and the reason you call out both of them is the second pack brings in the ability to monitor certificates in the environment. Now, a lot of people, when they deploy VCF, let it do its thing and everything like that, and if it's been up for a while, certificates are one of the things that, unless you're replacing them with your own ones, might potentially run out. Now, when you're looking to upgrade, it runs through a number of checks before it actually starts the upgrade to make sure everything's well and operational, and certificates are one of the things it does check. So instead of getting to that stage where you want to do an upgrade and it fails because the certificates run out, there's a dashboard that allows you to start monitoring those certificates. And again, you can feed it into CMDBs to then have that alert much beforehand to replace them, but it also gives information on the actual certificates themselves, distinguished names and things like that. But this is something that wasn't available before, but now you can start seeing all of the certificates in your environment. You're talking vCenter, ESXi, NSXT, SDDC, and its integrations. So it means you can see the whole environment and understand where your certificates are. You can plan ahead to make sure that you don't get into that position where the certificates have either expired or you've got a couple of days and you have to rush around and do it. So this is a really good dashboard that comes with the SDDC management pack. So going into some operational do's and don'ts. So VCF is great. It's the automation of the deployment, but it also then goes into the day two operations, and that is one thing that can catch people out, is that where people are very used to doing things in vSphere, when you come to VCF, a lot of those tasks that you'd normally do day to day in vSphere, you can't do anymore. You can still do them, but they have to be done and driven through the SDDC Manager. And when it comes to things like upgrades, the upgrade, like I said, will run a number of pre-checks, and it's looking for things. And the problem you might see is if you change something inside vSphere, like maybe a distributed switch name or something like that, everything will carry on working. You won't see any impact of that change until you come to an upgrade. So it is important to make sure that changes you make in the environment are driven by the correct tools. Now, there are many tasks that can still be carried out by vSphere, but you have to make sure you choose the right tool to make those changes. Otherwise, when it does come to upgrades, you will find that they won't pass the validation checks. So it comes up a lot is, when it comes to the VCF construct, is can I do this, can I do that? Again, based on which tool you might use. One of the things to bear in mind, if it's not documented, then don't do it. It's when the VMware documentation is created, it tells you what you can do. It doesn't tell you necessarily what you can't do. So if it doesn't say you can do it, then don't do it. It's not worth the risk. So just take that into mind as well. In the VCF environment, it's a bit more important that you do get things right the first time. There are a lot of things you can change after you've deployed and things like that, but there's a lot of things you can't change as well. So making sure you get it right the first time is quite important. That's even down to like naming conventions, and things like that of switches, hosts, and everything like that. So planning it beforehand and making sure you do get it right the first time is a lot more important. And when it comes to backups, because of the connection between the SDDC manager and all the components, they need to be backed up and kept in sync. So if you don't have the backups of the main things like the SDDC manager, vCenter, and NSX manager, then if you have an issue going forward, then it could be a lot harder for you to recover your environment to a fully working condition. And again, exporting those to a different location, a lot of them by default are set to store on the SDDC manager itself, which is great most of the time. But if the SDDC manager is the one that goes down, then you just need to make sure you have the potential to be able to recover those backups going forward as well.
There is a link, sorry, just on that, for any of the best practices around backups of VCF. There's another little code there, takes you off to various different products. Password management. This is probably one of my favourite ones in the last few months, because I'm pretty sure every person I've worked with recently seems to have fallen foul to how they've managed their passwords for the different components. So SDDC Manager controls and needs to be aware of all the different passwords for the different components. So whether that is your vCenter, your ESXi hosts, NSX, and even as much as vRealize Suite. It's not called that anymore, is it? Yeah, the ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager. You'll need to be able to actually manage those from from SDDC Manager. It is in control of them, and it wants to know, especially when it comes to upgrades. If your passwords in the SDDC Manager database are out of sync compared to what you've got on the actual appliances, you're not going to have a good time. It's going to start failing things. So really trying to avoid changing them outside of SDDC Manager probably should be something you should think about. But there could be times, for instance, so down here, passwords do expire, unless for some reason you've decided that it's a best practice not to expire passwords and leave them forever. It's not, so don't do that. And actually, you can't do that in VCF. It's not supported. If you try and upgrade and you set, for example, an NSX root password to not expire, you're not going to upgrade. But really, you shouldn't be setting it to not expire in the first place. I hope everybody probably has come across that one. What you can do, though, is if you do happen to come across an expired password and it is flagging up, and what you will see in here, you'll get different status alarms depending on the status of the password. You can then actually remediate them, and that might involve, in the case of an expired password, logging into an appliance, resetting the password via the method required for that account, and then coming back into SDDC Manager and then actually remediating the password. So you can get multiple options off the three little dots next to the side of the accounts. You can have an option there which is for remediate, and what you can do is, after resetting the password on the appliance, come in here, hit remediate, and provide the same password, and SDD Manager will validate that, update its database, and then go, I'm happy again, and give you hopefully a nice green tick when saying active. So you need to consider those things. And the next thing is, because they are managed by SDDC Manager and they can be rotated, which is one of the features, and in one of these screenshots here, it is showing as data disabled because it is in my lab, and I'm not following best practice, but you can schedule the rotations of those. So what that means is you will not know what those passwords are by default because they're going to rotate to random passwords. So there are a couple of methods in which you can pull out these passwords, one of them being the API, which we've got up here. So if you go into the Developer Center inside the SDDC Manager, you can explore the APIs. You'll find one that looks just like that. And then you can execute that, and it will give you, I don't actually have the list on here because there's only so much you can fit on one slide, but it will then give you an output. I'm pretty sure it's JSON off the top of my head. Yeah. Which will list out all the passwords for all the different components within your SDDC. The other option is there is a command line option, which is lookup_passwords. That will do a similar thing, although with this one, you actually have to specify which entity or object you're trying to get it for. So if it's for ESXi, you'll need to specify ESXi. If it's for NSX, you have to specify NSX. So the API can be a lot nicer because you can just say, give me everything. And the reason you might want to do that is to probably put them into password management solutions, because as much as having the passwords in SDDC Manager is lovely, if SDDC Manager dies and your backups are still on there as well and your passwords are on there, you are not having a very good day. So exporting those off to a password management solution where somebody can securely get them, you can be using that as a way to help you achieve that. And I kind of did touch upon it. Don't remove expirations on passwords. It's A, not a good idea, and it B, breaks your upgrades.
And again, we've got customers that have policies around changing passwords, say every 30 days, some complexity. And with the schedule, you've got the ability to remotely call and have the SDDC manager change those at a regular interval. But again, because of the API functionality, you can make that remote call, get those passwords back again. So it takes away, it stops being a manual task. It means that someone doesn't have to go in there and supply the passwords. You can automate that whole process, reporting back to a CMDB. So you then have the ability to track it, to be able to report that it's happening. So if you need SOX or PCI compliance and things like that, you've got the ability to show that passwords are being changed regularly, scheduled in a way that, you know, it's not the same one being used for every component and things like that as well.
So yeah, onto the actual good stuff, which is upgrades. Has anybody been through a VCF upgrade? How did you find that? That was I prefer their response. Theirs was nicer. It can be a slightly more difficult process, perhaps, but a lot of what we've talked about in here is designed basically to try and give you those heads up that you can make your life a lot easier when it does come to upgrade time, because you can avoid some of those little issues that hold you up and you have to try and address, and just makes the whole process a little bit more painful than it might need to be. So here is just sort of an example of some of the things to consider as part of a runbook that you might produce for your environment that will be specific for yourselves. So first of all, release notes. I am probably one of the guiltiest for going, yeah, I know I'm doing, put the instruction book to the side and then not really read any release notes. But read them. They are really important. It will tell you about any known issues, any of the features. Definitely should be doing that. The next thing is to be checking your hardware and firmware checks. So before you even get to the software stack, let's make sure that your hardware and all the firmware you've got installed, if perhaps those processes that you have around that are not as stringent maybe as your software ones, you really need to make sure that you're not going to create a problem by trying to install versions over the top of hardware that doesn't support it.
Custom images. So through the SDDC manager, you have the ability to use custom images. So that would be hardware for vendor provided ones, Dell, HPE, to name a few. Checking those out. So when the SDDC manager updates his BOM, you need new versions and things like that. So checking on those to see if a custom image is available from the vendor is quite important. A number of times vendors might only release images every quarter, 6 months or something like that. So there might not actually be an image that will work with the SDDC manager BOM, but you have the ability to create your own one. So you can take an image, put the vendor supplied add-ons into it. So you might need to do that work up front to then be able to load it into the SDDC manager to make it usable for the upgrade process itself.
Upgrade bundles. So as part of an upgrade, you need the binaries. They come in the form of upgrade bundles. They can be either downloaded online, or you can be using the offline tool to pull those in for any environments which are air-gapped or don't have internet access for the SDDC manager. Just one thing to think or consider there is do make sure you have enough disk space on the SDDC manager appliance for what you're trying to put on there. You don't really want to be trying to get your upgrade going and then go, hang on a minute, I've got to now sort out my disk space that I've just ruined. So make sure you consider that one.
Yep, and disk space is one of the features in the SDDC manager pack. So you can see the health, and one of those is disk space. So you can see that through area operations. Running health checks. So obviously this whole presentation is going through a number of tools that are available to make sure your environment is healthy beforehand. Almost all of them are non-invasive, so you can run them well before change windows, make sure that everything is healthy at the time, and the actual checks inside that the SDDC manager runs on the environment are also non-intrusive. So you can go into the SDDC manager to check on all of the components by running a test beforehand as well.
And then confirm your backups. You do not want to head into an upgrade, as I'm sure everybody's aware with any bit of technology. Don't run into an upgrade without knowing you've got a good backup first. So make sure you have got some good backups. And I know you can there see snapshots. Snapshots are not backups. Don't rely on them. But having some cold offline snapshots of your appliances could be quite useful to you should you end up in a sticky situation in upgrade and need to do a bit of rollback. So backups need to be your absolute must. Snapshots are there to give you a helping hand should you need it. And it kind of feeds in again with the backup your VDS. Not really a VCF specific concept, but you can export and back up your virtual distributed switch config separately, which is a recommended practice to do. Again, follows and applies with VCF as well.
Cold snapshots especially is a recommendation, well, pretty much a guarantee if you're using workload domains because of the SSO ring and everything like that. Taking them offline, snapshotting them at the same time guarantees that doesn't guarantee, it will help in any inconsistencies that might then happen around SSO as well. Another one, third-party integration. So it can be missed a number of times, but VCF is, the construct of a vSphere environment, so all of the products are working together, and that's all great. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to have third-party integrations into it, whether it be backup, whether it be monitoring, or any other tools that reaches into the environment. You need to make sure that those are supported on the versions you go into as well. That can get missed at times, and obviously what you don't want to do is upgrade your whole VCF stack and then suddenly find your backup software is not supported and then you can't back up the virtual machines in the environment. So making sure any third-party integration touch points are supported on the version which is published in the VCF release notes. It'll have the bill of materials, which is the version of all the VMware products they're going to. So making sure they're all compatible with any integrations is really important as well.
And then lastly, not necessarily applicable to everybody, but if you do have the ability to log a proactive SR, make use of it. It's there. If you happen to be paying for that level of support, definitely make use of it. And if you happen to be able to make use of any vendor initiatives to help you, again, make use of it. There's no point in everybody being out there and having these tools available to you if you can't make use of them or unaware that you can make use of them. So always ask some questions of your vendors and VMware and your support teams and account teams and see what can be done to help you. And lastly, it's enroll into the upgrade pre-assessment. And hopefully, when you get to that bit, if you've made sure the environment's lovely to start with, that should just go through and be nice and green and you can hit go, hopefully.
And the great thing about the pre-assessment is it's constantly evolving. So each version adds more checks. Previously it might not have checked for certificates or password expiry. Each iteration adds more and more checks into the environment. So whereas anyone was been through some of the earlier upgrades, you'd hit a stumbling block. You'd have to work out what it is, fix it yourself. The more and more checks we add into the pre-assessment task should hopefully mean that once you get to the other end, it's not guaranteed obviously, but we're checking more and more things all of the time to make sure that anything that could potentially impact the upgrade is captured.
And there was a QR code. A QR code, that'll take you through to all of the official upgrade documentation. It's quite extensive, a bit like the release notes. Definitely go and read it. Upgrade orders. So some questions that I've definitely recently had, and I'm sure James has had multiple times, anybody else who's involved with helping people with upgrades has probably had as well, is how should I approach it? So first of all, non-production. Not everybody has a non-production environment, unfortunately. Standing up a lot of hardware for a lab or a non-prod environment can be quite costly for certain organizations. There are some other alternatives out there. So there's VLC, and holodeck now, which give you the options for being able to test certain elements of upgrades. That QR code should take you to holodeck, hopefully, and I've finally got the right one. But when it comes to actually looking at the order you want to upgrade in, and it's applicable for both production and non-production, you need to start with your management domain. That will be the first place you start your upgrade, and then you will work down then into your workload domains. And it might be just that you have one workload domain, you might have 2, 3, 4, etc., going up to 14, in total is the maximum, which is in line with the SSO limits for replication. So start with your non-prod, management domain first, move on to your workloads. If you're happy, move into production, and then go forward on there. We did touch upon the disk space thing again. Always make sure you've got disk space before you move into these. Just because you've tested it in the lab and you make sure you had enough disk space there, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have enough disk space in production when you get to that one. So make sure you're checking that one as well. And the last thing is, we get questions a lot about, can I just upgrade my management domain and then leave the workload domains? No, you can't. Once you start, you need to finish the whole job. So if you've got 14 workload domains and your management domain, you're doing 15 different upgrades. You can't leave them in a mismatched state. So you need to be making sure that you're planning your upgrades in a timely fashion and achieve them in a window that isn't excessive, let's say.
And just to go back to mentioning VLC and Holo, they are the ability to run VCF environment in a nested environment, and that is great, obviously, as Stephan said, if you don't have the hardware. But one thing to take into account in that is that because it's not representation of physical hardware, there might be some firmware and driver related issues that can only be picked up if you have a representative physical environment. So they are great environments. They help you test, understand the process and everything like that. But where possible, if you can go physical, it gives you that extra security of knowing that firmware and drivers are in there as well.
Cool. And then lastly, an upgrade isn't necessarily finished just after vCenter, SDDC Manager, NSX, etc. The last bit in that is then your ARIA suite, formerly vRealize. So as part of the upgrade, SDDC Manager will help you get to the point where it will get you to upgrade the ARIA suite lifecycle manager up to the latest version that is included in the bill of materials. But then from there, you are then have the flexibility to change not change. You've got a minimum version of the other products within the suite, but you've got the ability to then go and install different versions depending on your requirements. And you have that flexibility even after upgrades. So that if there's a new release of, let's say, automation, so 8.12 just came out recently, you may want to upgrade that, but you don't really have either the time or the need to upgrade the other ones right now. You have that flexibility. So Lifecycle Manager is part of the VCF upgrade. The rest of the components are then separate upgrades as of VCF 4.4. That's the case. One of the things that can then be helpful is the product support packs, and you will need these. So if you want to upgrade one of these to a later version than your Lifecycle Manager, Lifecycle Manager, when it was originally installed, may not actually know about those products because they're going to be released after it. The product support packs, which you can download from the VMware website, that is the way that Lifecycle Manager then can pick up that actually I know about this nice new version of ARIA automation, and then you can do those. So I have seen a number of tickets recently where people have got or missed the fact that they needed to download a support pack and just said it doesn't work, can't install it, can't download it. They're important, so something to be on your radar. Did you want to do those last three?
No.
My voice will begin to go.
Okay. And so with the decoupling, the interoperability becomes and something that you need to take into account. There's published KB articles that show what support pack you need to be at for different versions for VCF, Lifecycle Manager, and then the ability to deploy the ARIA products. So you do need to check on that before you go through any upgrade process. The last two.
So I probably left you in the dark on those. I'll go back to it now and have a drink. So the configuration automation. So again, a bit like what we've spoken about with ARIA operations and operations for logs, about once you've configured the SDDC manager, it can automatically pick up the extra bits. The same applies across all these products. It's got the ability to dynamically see them all. And finally is the certificate and password management. So one of the benefits to not vRealize anymore, ARIA Suite's Lifecycle Manager, is that when you are deploying these additional components, the password and certificate management can all be done via Lifecycle Manager, so that you haven't individually got to manage certificates and passwords for all these other components. Centralizes it. Hopefully will make your life a lot easier going forward with any of the upgrades and just your general maintenance.
Don't think we have time for questions, but we can take questions outside if there are any. Like you said, that was a whistle-stop tour. A lot of those topics you could do a whole session on some of them. So they were to make you aware of the products that are out there. You can investigate them, but any questions you've got, we'll be happy to reach out to us, and we'll answer where we can. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.